Well, that was quick. I'm into a goodish fish already. I'm making a programme today on maggot and caster fishing using a pole. And we're close to the little village of Pidley. It's in Cambridgeshire, quite close to where I live. I live in March, so it's not far. And the fishery is called Rookery Waters. And it's right in the heart of the fens really. It's fairly flat, so it picks up the wind here. But I'm fishing with the wind behind me and it's a comfortable peg. I've already cupped a little bit of bait in, some maggots and caster, a mixture of two, and just fishing with a single maggot on the hook. The lake I'm fishing today, I think there's about 3 lakes on this complex, and this one is called Magpie Lake. I wonder what this is. It's not a massive fish, but it's reasonable. It's a great one to start off with. Oh, it's a carp. Lovely carp. Probably about £1, I should think. Let's have a look at it. Almost looks as if it's a bit like a ghost carp. And it is. It looks as if it's got a bit... I'll show it to the camera. Yeah, it's a... See that very light, silvery look? Just hooked inside the mouth. I'll use my disgorger on that very carefully. It's about £1, that one. Yeah, a small ghost carp. Just a start of, just an example of the sort of fish that you can catch. Particularly this time of year, it's early spring, the water's still very cold. It's been cold. Sometimes you get an early spring and it's been very warm, but the water temperature's still very cold. It was snowing just over a week ago, so I thought today using maggots and casters would have a good chance of catching fish. Maggot usually catches everything. So we're looking just to feed across on the far bank with a cupful of caster and maggot, fish on it, and look for everything that we can catch. It's so good to catch an early fish. I just had that on a single red maggot on the hook. And what I did initially, and I'll show you later exactly what I did, but I potted some maggots and casters in, and then just loose feeding. Always takes a little while to get the fish warmed up, to get them feeding and competing for food. So, and then I'm loose feeding a little bit over the top just to try and draw some fish into that baited area. So there's a big pot of feed down. I'm fishing on the bottom, but a big pot of feed down, and then loose feeding around. Can you believe that? Do you know what I've done? As I was shipping out, I've hooked a small fish. Oh, it's come off. It's come off anyway. So I think it was a small rudd or something. That can often happen. Quite windy today. The wind is coming from behind me and it's quite strong. Put another maggot on and go out so if I can catch a bigger fish. I've got got my shot fairly well bulked so I can get through and hopefully avoid those small fish. Just going out and then dropping the bait down right over where I cupped all that bait in. Just dropping it down. I'm fishing in a channel here. It's a narrow part of the lake, and they call it the channel. And the water's running through a bit, but there's a few chub. There's all different species of fish here. That's why I selected the spot. But it's almost running like a river where it's going through. Just waiting for that bite again. The bait's got to the bottom, so if it goes, it's going to be a big fish. It looks like I'm going to be in for a good day. There's another one on already. I love it when it's like this, you know, when there's lots of action, catching plenty of fish. And it's the first time I've fished on this venue, so I'm always a bit, you just don't know what you're going to catch. And I get quite excited about what fish am I going to catch. And sometimes I try and guess the fish that I've hooked into, and I don't know what this one is. That first one was a lovely ghost carp. Now this one's fighting quite hard as well. But I've no idea what fish it is. It's lovely. Oh, I love it. I caught a glimpse of it. I think it's a tench. It is, it's a tench. I thought it was fighting a bit different. Just thumping away. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful tench. Only about a pound, but look at that. Lovely fish. Beautiful, perfect condition. You can see the tench, that slight greenish colour on the top, a greenish tinge. Very small scales, very smooth fish. And look, just let me get that. Can you just see? I'm on single red maggot. You can just see that red maggot poking out of the fish. Only lip hooked it. Maggot is a sort of bait that catches anything. You just don't know what you're going to get. Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit in depth about the bait that I'm using today. Maggots, everybody seems to think they know about maggots, but there's things about them that you can do to them to prepare them and how you actually use them. Sometimes when you buy them from a bait shop, they're not clean and you need to riddle them. This is what they call a maggot riddle. The size of the mesh is such that maggots will crawl through. If I tip these maggots that I'm using today, you can see there's little bits of fluff on the top here of these, so really that wants to come off. So if I tip those maggots onto the riddle like that, the good thing about maggots is they don't like light, so if you put them onto a riddle, they try to immediately go through the riddle. If you can see them going through there, and they'll leave any dead maggots, there's a couple of dead ones on there, they'll leave them behind. These bits of fluff that you don't want. So I find it's always a good idea to carry a maggot riddle with you. And when I get to the bank, I just put my maggots on there. Even though, as I say, they come from the bait shop and they're pretty good, you can still see there's odd dead ones, bits of fluff, which you don't really want. Sometimes it's worse than others. Now this particular maggot is the larva of a bluebottle. It takes, probably once the fly lays its eggs, it takes about 7 days for the eggs to hatch. And then it takes another 7 days for them to come from sort of tiny eggs into this size of maggot, this big red maggot. Let me show you some of these. There's a bit of residue and you can just throw them away. The fish will eat those. I'll throw them in the edge there. So it takes 7 days for them to grow to this size. And then in another 7 days, they then turn into chrysalis, or casters as we call them. And we're going to be using these as well today. So there's the casters, that's what they've turned into. And then another 7 days, and then they turn into flies. So it's roughly a 28-day cycle. Depends a little bit on temperature. If it's very warm, it speeds it up, and if it's very cold, it slows it down. And casters are another bait that catch you big fish. You know, the casters, or the crystallised version of this blue bottle maggot, catches you big fish. So we'll be using those as well later. Sometimes if you're getting pestered with small fish, you can put one of these casters on and catch better quality fish. I've put these casters, if you notice, I've put them in. I bought these from the tackle shop today, But I've put them in some water there, because what happens if, say it's fairly warm, and you buy some casters from a shop and you leave them completely exposed to the air, what happens is they turn more and more as you're fishing throughout the day, and in the end they would actually float. These all sink at the moment, so what I've done is I've covered them, just covered them with water, and they will stay exactly then as you buy them. So whenever you get them from the shop, just cover them with water, just about, and they will stay the same colour all day long. There's always a variety of colours, some lighter, some darker, as they run these casters off. They're beautiful. They're really, really nice casters too. Looking forward to using those today and catching plenty of fish. Back in with single red maggot again. It's already caught me fish, so I've only got a small hook on there, size 18, and it's a fairly fine wire hook, but I'll go through the rig later on. Just single maggot, going over that area where I've potted some bait in earlier. When you're shipping out with a pole, just make sure you keep the front end down. As long as you keep your rig in the water, your pole rig in the water, then it won't tangle. And then the wind's blowing quite hard today, so I'm making sure I've plumbed up across on the other side there, and it's sort of quite deep, fairly close to that other bank. And I'm trying to fish in the crease. If you imagine, if you plumb up and where it comes down fairly steeply, I'm trying to fish in the bottom of that crease, probably in the deepest part. Just laying my bait over. And then from there it starts to shelve up pretty quickly. And apart from the maggots that I've potted in, I'm also just loose feeding a few around the float, just to attract fish into the area. So every now and again, just a few maggots loose feeding round. They'll drop slowly through the water, bring fish into the area, and then hopefully the bigger ones will go down onto the main volume of bait, the bait that I've potted in. I'm fishing just over depth today, as well as I said, it's running through a bit there, so I've set my float probably 3 or 4 inches deeper than the depth, so the maggot is actually laying on the bottom, and there's a little bit of line on the bottom as well, just to keep it there. Looking to move the bait a bit. Just, if you think about it, a maggot is fairly much alive. It does wriggle, so the fish don't mind if a maggot moves. It's sort of, they think it's natural, so they'll grab at it. And then sort of I'm letting the float run through over the baited area. In fact, holding it a little bit at times. You see that? See how I'm holding the bait, trying to look for those larger fish. Getting them feeding, getting them competing, and then catching them. And I'm into another fish. Everything's working perfectly today. Just a matter of getting the fish into that area where you're feeding. You can see that elastic working. I've got a hollow elastic in there. It's a grey hydro elastic, it's called. It's probably equivalent to about a number 10 or 12, so it can handle some fairly big fish. Just unshipping and then playing the fish out. You don't have to exhaust the fish, but take your time. Remember, this is the real pleasure of fishing, catching the fish, seeing what you're catching, and then thinking, what is it? What is it under the water that's taking my bait? You can see, even though that's a number 12 elastic, it's out a fair way. these fish do seem to fight hard. Do you know what? Already we've 3 fish and every one's different. This is a barbel. Look at that. Which is not known for still water, but funny enough, still water barbel do fight and feed well. That is. But you could see how that one fought, and it's probably only about 10 ounces. But that is just a small barbel, see it, long, beautiful tail. But if you look at it, see how healthy the fish is, how fit it is. Lovely big long barbels, just lip hooked. 3 different species already. Unbelievable. I started feeding with a pole cup. Now the pole cup is a piece of equipment that fits onto the end of a special section. This is designed, this is what they call a cupping kit. It's designed to be the same length as the top kit you're using, so that you imagine if I put this on my pole now and go out, as long as I pick a line on the far bank, and as long as I hold the pole in exactly the same place as when I'm fishing, then that will deposit the bait exactly where I want to fish. And it's so important. It's precision feeding. It's something you can't do if you're using a waggler. You can't just feed the same. And it's really one of the things that has made pole fishing what it is today. Brilliant, accurate feeding. Now in the cup itself, I'm fishing with caster and maggot, so I'm going to do both. I'm going to put some casters into the cup. This cup holds about 250 mils if I fill it right up. I won't fill it right up. Put some maggot. So you're feeding what the fish are eating. I'm not sure what's going to be best, whether it's caster or maggot. So I'm starting with caster, starting with maggot, but feeding both. So that's about probably 2/3 full, that pot. Maybe a little bit less. Taking it easy at first and then increasing the volumes if we need to. It's a good stiff cupping kit. Just watch when you ship it out. As you ship out, watch when you come off the end of your roller. As you come off the end of the roller, if the pole's not balanced, it will flick up in the air and you'll lose the contents in the wrong place, and then just steadily ship out. Think about, now I picked about a spot where I'm fishing all the time, where I'm feeding. Picked a marker on the far bank so I know that every time I will feed to that. And also I'm holding the pole in exactly the same place each time as well. And I'm going to sprinkle those contents. It's a biggish volume, so you know that some of that's going to get to the bottom. So that's going in, and then I'm loose feeding over the top just to draw some fish in. And gradually throughout the day, you imagine as you keep doing that, I always feed to the bites, but probably if I'm getting plenty of bites, every 3/4 of an hour, another good pot full of feed. Maybe less if I'm getting bites quicker. So you feed to your bites. If you're not getting any bites, then just slow up a bit. And if you're getting loads of bites, then keep feeding. Pole cups are brilliant. That's just on the end of the kit, and I know then that I'm exactly in the right place. Well, it's brilliant fishing so far. I'm still not going to change to maggot, so I've fed another big pot full of stuff in. Sometimes when you put that first bit, when you put a load of feed in, the fish just back off a little bit, but then they come back again. If you didn't feed, you wouldn't catch anything. Just remember that fishing is all about feeding. I always say it. And I stick to, at the moment we've been really successful on that red maggot, so single red maggot again. Thought about feeding, there's a big pot of feed in there. Keep that, as you're shipping out, keep that rig in the water, then it won't tangle. Just keep it in the water. I've also got to, as I go out, I've got to just keep back a little bit from that. It really shallows up, so I want to make sure my bait's in that deeper water. I'm looking for the bigger fish in that deep water. So I'm trying to make sure my hook bait keeps this side rather than flicking it up the shelf. It's only a very short distance before it shallows up, so I want to keep my bait in the deep water, just on that crease, just where it starts to really go up steeply. It's a natural place for fish to want to be, the bottom of that deep shelf when it's colder, and as the day wears on they will probably move up the shelf, and we can perhaps fish in the slightly shallower water halfway up the shelf or almost fully up the shelf, because there'll be some fish there as well. So even though I've fed that big pot of maggots, and don't worry, just a few maggots round, loose feeding. Remember, feeding, it's all part of it, just feeding a few loose fed maggots, some up the bank as well, some in the shallower water where perhaps I want to fish later on. And then, now I'm laying that maggot over depth, just over that big pot full of feed that I've just put in. To catch big fish, or bigger fish, you need some feed there. They don't just arrive and feed, they only come when you've put some bait in and there's some competition, and the fish think they're going to miss out. If they don't get in there and take that bait, they think, oh, I'm going to miss out here. That's how you catch them. I'm just running it, it's just flowing like a river there now, so I'm just letting it run down over depth. Every now and again, just lift it and drop it. Keep the bait on the move all the time. If you don't get a bite, just go in. As I said, the water temperature is still very, very low, so really it should be difficult fishing, but it's been brilliant so far. It's good when a plan comes together, and when you know that because of feeding, because of accurate feeding, then you start to catch and the fish move on it. When you put your hook bait over it, you're into a fish. That's the real pleasure I get from fishing, you know. Is feeding the fish to get them into your area, and then catching them. It's another good fish. Just letting the elastic do its job and sliding the pole back. Once you've slid the pole back, then you can unship. You've just got your bottom sections, letting your elastic do the job. Well, I think I'll call this the mystery fish day, because at the moment I've never known what I'm going to hook. But this is quite a powerful fish. Not coming to the top easy. It's sort of one of those stubborn fish. It's keeping down. Oh, lovely. I love it. It's just perfect. Even in these cold conditions, it's amazing. These quality fish are feeding. It's taking some getting in, this one. Putting a lot of pressure on it too. Oh, it's just caught a glimpse of it. And yes, another fish, a different species. This is just I say just this is a common carp. We've had a ghosty, this is a common. Quite a good fish, but because of all that biggest volume of bait that we're putting over that tight area, now the fish are increasing in size. As they come in, remember what I was saying, how they come in competing for the food. That's a lovely fish. Just hooked in, so I'm keeping this net over here for a minute. It's just hooked inside the mouth, so I'm going to use this Slamo disgorger. It's usually better for these deeply hooked fish. Got to keep some tension on this line though. Yeah. sometimes I put the line between my legs like that, so that it's tight. When you go to unhook a fish, you want it tight as you push down. It's quite deeply hooked, this one. But usually these slammos will get them out straight away. That's it, perfect. Perfect for deeply hooked fish. Let's just show that one to the camera. That is a lovely, beautiful common carp. Now, put that in the net. Let's have a look at the rig that I'm using today to catch these fish. Been catching them, but you want to know exactly what I'm using. So I'll run through it with you. Just take that dead maggot off the hook. So let's have a look at this. And let's start from the hook itself. I'm using, sometimes I like to use a black or a red hook for maggot fishing, but this is a size 18 and it's a barbless maggot. Barbless, it's mustad, but it's a barbless maggot. A fairly fine wire hook. Still strong enough to land biggish carp, but fairly fine because I'm using maggot, and maggots are a light bait, so you have to couple it up with the hook size. You want a light hook as well. The hook length I'm using today is 0.10. Well, it says 0.105, but it's just over 2 pound breaking strain, 2¼ pound breaking strain. So it's a fine line, but it's still fairly strong. And I would expect that I could land fish up to 10 pound with this combination of elastic and line. So although it says 2 pound, you can land, because you're using elastic, you can land much bigger fish. So that's the hook length. And here, just here, you can see this small knot. That's a twisted figure of 8. I tried to keep it small, so just to get good presentation. And then above that, I've got a number 11 stot. These are like an elongated lead, but they're pure lead, very soft, and they don't damage these. This line I'm using is a high-tech pre-stretch line, so it's thin for its breaking strain. Not like it hasn't got any stretch at all, but it's a very, very strong. And if we move just above there, then I have another number 11 stot. So I've got 2 of these, and there's about probably a 3 or 4 inch spacing there. And up to a bulk of shot there, can you see, or stots? There's 5 more there, and they will be number 9 stots. That's the main bulk, probably set about mid-depth, that, just to get the bait down and through those smaller fish and give a little bit of stability in this wind. It's blowing through quite hard and it's flowing, so just to get a bit of stability to the bait. The main line is 0.12 diameter, that's about 3 pound breaking strain. So this main line is heavier than the hook length. If I do happen to break off, and it's very, very rare it happens, it's just the hook length that goes and the fish is not dragging all the rig and everything around with it. So the hook length will always go first. And going up further to the float, now the float is a new type of float that I've been using, and it's from Browning. You can see the size on it. It's 0.3 of a gram, just on there. We call this is we've actually named it an F1 float, F1 carp. Now F1s are a sort of a hybrid carp, and they're very delicate feeders. And you have a job to see the bite. So here I've got a hollow bristle, which really picks up the light because it's hollow, but very, very sensitive. A very, very strong eye because we're fishing for carp. So the eye is long and really glued well in there so it doesn't pull out. And then a carbon stem. So it's a balsa body, carbon stem, and then this hollow tip, which really picks up the light. Then moving up further, I've probably got about It's a fair bit of wind today. When it's windy, you have to use a bit more line between the tip of your float and the top, because the pole top is moving around. So I've got something like probably 15 or 16 inches between there, onto a connector. And to fit this to the connector, I've just done an overhand loop and clipped it on to the connector there. And then this grey hydro, it's a hollow elastic, grey hollow elastic. It's about probably equivalent to a number 12, but I much prefer to use hollow elastics, particularly for big fish. You can land almost any size fish on a hollow elastic. It's much, much stronger. Now you notice that I've got everything set up to make it comfortable for me. And at the front here, I've got what I call the pole catcher. All you do is you just slip the pole under there. When it's windy, you've got the pole on the roller, but it will still blow around. So this catcher just drops in. You can imagine it doesn't damage the pole at all. In the past, we used to use a clip that you push the pole into and it could fly out and everything. But with that, you can set your roller so there's a little bit more weight at the back of your pole. So it makes it just easy to come off, so that when you just slip out, connect up, and then you use the roller at the rear just to let it come smoothly as you ship out, keeping it down, and just watch until you come off the end. As you come off the end, you get a slight, but I've set the roller so it's perfectly balanced almost, so as it comes off, it doesn't really, just comes up a little bit. And then it's balanced in my hand to go out over the feed area. Just dropping in to make sure. And always taking note of where I'm holding the pole. If I go, particularly here, if I go too far, then I'm going up that shelf. And then flicking a few maggots around that float just to draw fish in. If anything, a few of them are going past and up that shelf, which I hope to go on to later, just with a rig that's set more shallow. As the day goes on, I would expect the bigger fish to be right at the back there in that slightly shallower water. And what I'm doing is, if I let the float run, it'll run too quickly through that, because it is almost flowing. So I've got the tip of the pole just under the water. I'm trying to hold the float. Can you see I'm holding the float? And every now and again I'm pulling the float forward a little bit. What it's doing is it's dragging the maggot along the bottom just a little bit. Not enough to disturb the fish. But because I'm fishing on the bottom, it doesn't look too unnatural to the fish. It's just there, it's dragging on the bottom. I'm looking, there's the bite, and I'm into the fish. Not a big fish, this one, I don't think. I was just hanging on to it. Just a small fish, this one. But that's what you can expect with maggot fishing. Oh, look at this. Oh, I don't believe it. What sort of day are we having today? This is a goldfish by the looks of it. Ooh. This is a goldfish. I thought, when I struck, I thought it just feels like a big dead weight. And it is a goldfish of some sort. Look at that, beautiful. That looks, oh, look at the colours on that. It's so, oh, that really is beautiful. Let me just unhook it first before I show it to camera, but it's quite a big fish. It's probably almost half a pound. Maggot's right down inside it again, so let's just use this Slamo disgorger. Well, look at that. It's a goldfish with sort of whitish marks on it, but it's a goldfish. Just like the ones you used to win at the fair, only a bit bigger. Probably worth a little bit of money too, but very heavy. Lovely, in absolutely perfect condition. Let me show you exactly how I searched the bottom, because you always need to know, you can't just come along and fish at any depth. You need to know the contours of the bottom, where the shelves are and where you decide to fish. So you start with a plummet, which is a weight of varying sizes. I try not to use one too heavy for this sort of fishing. Don't want to disturb the fish. And I'm looking for the part where it starts to go up. Now if I go into the middle there, you can probably see it's just, if I look there, it's just a bit deeper there than where I'm fishing. I don't want to fish the middle water, but it just goes under and I can see the connector when it sort of stops going. So there, it's still, see there, it's just starting now to go up that shelf. It's still quite deep, and if I go a little bit further, still a goodish depth. So that's a fairly level part. See if I drop that, bang, there. So that's the 3 or 4 inches that I'm fishing over depth. Now if I go more, you'll see it will really start to come up. See that? There, look, it's really coming up steeply. So that I know that I'm fishing, and there, more. And there is sort of almost like the top of the shelf, and that's half the depth at what I'm fishing. So I'm fishing just at the bottom of that shelf where it starts to go up, and just a little bit less than a float, probably over depth. But at least you can search the whole of the bottom and the contours, and you need to do this so that you know, you're in your mind, oh, I'm fishing just with my maggot just on the bottom, it's a bit windy today, I want to keep everything stable. So that's what you do it for. If it was very calm, I could probably fish a little bit shallower, but I really want to get my bait on the bottom. That's where the bigger fish are. Anything up above that will probably be smaller. So I want to get my bait down and on the bottom. Let's go straight out again. So we've got the depth, which I did that that's the first thing really that you do when you sit down. You plumb up, think about where you're going to fish, then you feed in that area, and then you fish in that area. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. You sometimes think, oh, maybe I'll have to move, or maybe I'll have to do something different, but usually, if you look for something a bit different, so this is a commercial fishery, if you look for something, an island, or fishing up against a ledge, or where we're fishing where it's going from the deepest part very quickly up to the shallowest, you imagine that's a natural place for the fish to want to be. So that's what you search out. You could also look to fish in the margins on your bank close in. It's another place where fish like to be. Somewhere where naturally they would probably find their food, particularly margins, insects and that dropping the edge. Always going back to the same spot and then just letting the float run down. Loose feeding. You'll always notice that I'm always feeding or doing something to entice the fish to feed. I don't care as long as I spray those maggots just around the area where the float is. I know the ones that I've cupped in are exactly where I'm fishing, so that's where I expect to catch the bigger fish. And then just holding onto the bait a little bit. Goldfish. And in again, but this is just a small fish. Don't know what this is. This is just a tiny fish. Shouldn't really have caught this one. Because I'd got to the bottom, so even small fish. But sometimes this is a good signal to tell you, well, it's not bad, it's a small carp, it's not too bad. But sometimes when you start to catch small fish, it's sometimes a signal to tell you to feed again. I think I can just about swing this one. It's only about 4 or 5 ounces. Another beautiful little fish though. There. Lovely little, if I can unhook it. Lovely little common carp. Now when these start to feed or move in on the feed, I'll probably go in again and just try. But if small fish come in, usually it means all your bait's gone, so there's not enough there to hold the big fish. So then that's sometimes a signal for you to feed again. Just changed to a different, well, I've been loose feeding those maggots, and some of them have been going further past where I was fishing. I just thought I'll have a look on another rig. I've set another rig up sort of with space shots to try and see. Wow, look at this. Yes, can you believe it? It's another different species of fish. This is a small chub. I had heard there was chub in here. Yeah. Once again, another, really, you'd consider this to be in perfect condition. You consider this to be a river fish, a chub, but they do live, breed, and are very successful in still waters. And they love to take maggots, loose-fed maggots, so that's probably why they're further up on that far shelf. Where I've been firing the maggots and going past where I was fishing, the chub were taking it on the drop. So I changed the rig over to a sort of one that fell through the water more slowly to try and see if there were any fish taking on the drop. It could be that there'd be small fish, so we'll have a little go and just see if they're too small fish. I'll probably come back down on my deeper peg again and then swap the two lines. Now what you can do, you can either feed when you're holding the pole, or else you can loose feed before you go out. You can loose feed, and so the fish then can be taking these loose offerings. So say if I flick this loose feed now where I'm fishing, there, some are going past. Now you can imagine the fish coming into that. You can then ship out with your pole. Keep that rig down. This is a lighter rig. It's only 0.1 of a gram and space shot, so everything falls. It's the opposite. I'll run through that in a minute with you. It's the opposite to what I was using. I'm going to lay that out. So I'm laying that out where I've loose fed those maggots. Just looking at it, it could be we'd get pestered with too many small fish, but that chub was a lovely fish. Slightly lighter elastic on this one. It's probably equivalent to about a number 6 elastic. But once again, it's hollow because you can hook big fish on this. Now, because I'm fishing a little bit different on the drop, then I don't let it stay on the bottom too long. Sort of lift it and drop it and lay it on the water just to try and simulate those maggots that are falling through the water that I just loose fed. Call this fishing on the drop. This is the ideal way to fish for chub, really. They'd be probably the first fish, chub or rudd or roach, that you'd catch on this method. In the summer when it's very warm, you catch carp like this. But I'd expect the carp to be a bit nearer the bottom today. Now, if you want to loose feed when you're holding the pole, if you have a look and see the position that I'm holding the pole. So I trap the pole, let me show you. So I trap the pole here over my knee, and if you can see my arm, my forearm is bearing down on the pole, so it leaves me 2 hands free here to feed, so I can pick the maggots out of the container. Oh, I hooked the fish then when I was about to feed, but I'm going to feed anyway. Just hooked the fish when I laid it on the water, only a small fish. So that you do everything in reverse. If I push the catapult forward like that, hold the pole still, you can't move this right hand because it's trapping the pole. And then you can just push the pole forward and the maggots come out. And at the same time I struck with my knee, and we did have a small fish on, but I've lost it. But it was only a tiny one, so it doesn't matter. But I know if you miss a bite, when you're fishing with maggots or casters, you need to come in and check the bait, because the bait is often damaged. If it gets damaged, then you won't, unless the fish are really hungry, you won't get another bite on it. So yeah, and that maggot's just damaged there, and I know I wouldn't get, fish seem to know you wouldn't get another bite on that, so you need to put another one on and go out again. Just, as I say, you can either loose feed before you go out. If it's windy, you're probably better off doing that. If it's really windy, because it's more of a job to hold your pole then. And I'm putting about probably 20 maggots in there, in the pole, flicking it out where I'm fishing. Imagine the fish are all there feeding. They will take, you'll be amazed, they will take the loose maggots much quicker than they will take your hook bait. You just have to get them competing. Once they're competing, then they're easier to catch. But fish are not easy to catch. You know, they're shy, they can hear you on the bank, they can hear the disturbance you make, and they're always, particularly the bigger fish, are always a little bit wary. That's why normally you usually catch the smaller fish first, and it takes a while to overcome the fear that you get with the bigger fish. Just fishing on the drop. I've set that, I'm fishing halfway, probably halfway up that shelf, and just set it so it's just about touching bottom again, but I'm really looking to catch the fish as the bait drops through the water, just to see if there's any other type of fish there. There it goes. That one went right off the surface. Small fish again. But it took it right off the top. You'd expect that either to be sometimes a goodish, in here, a goodish chub probably, but this is probably a rudd or a roach, or only a small fish. Small fish, but they're all lovely quality. This is just a small rudd. Loads of different species of fish today. See the maggot? In fact, that maggot's not damaged. Still wriggling in its mouth. You can see the hook just coming through. Just carefully unhook that. It's only about 2 ounces, but perfect little fish. Taking the bait on the drop. I think today is going to be a day for fishing on the bottom, so I'm going to put that back there. I've only had one chub on this rig. I'll run through the rig that I'm using to catch these fish on the drop. Once again, I've got the same hook that I was using before. It's a maggot hook, 18, so it's the same. And it's a mustard, barbless maggot. Same line as well, 010, so fine, fairly fine line. 010 is probably a bit over the top for that small rudd, but it's just about right if we hook a carp or big chub. But I've done the shotting a little bit different on this. I've got once again, the same knot on my hook length, that twisted figure of 8, and the hook length is the same, £2, just over £2. The main line the same, 012 main line, which is just over £3. But the shots I've got spread out. I've got these are number 11 stots here. So I've got one there, and I've got that one on the hook length. If I'm getting a lot of bites, I'll bring it down to the hook. If I'm not seeing the bites, if I'm waiting for bites, then perhaps I'll push it up towards this knot a little bit. And just above the knot there, I've got another number 11. And these are equally spaced, probably nearly 4 inches apart. Another number 11, another number 11, another number 11. So there's 5 number 11 stots spaced out. You imagine to give you that fall through the water. And then up to the float, it's the same pattern of float that I was using before, but because I'm looking for a much slower fall through the water, I don't need a bulk, then it's only 0.1 of a gram. But otherwise it's the same. It's got the same carbon stem, the same balsa body, strong eye, and then this lovely hollow tip. This is brand new this year, these hollow tips, and they really are good. Similar length of line, about 18 inches, still very windy. Onto the elastic, which is, it's a hollow, Browning hollow. It's between 6 and number 8. It's fairly, it gives you a good spread. In fact, with this elastic, you know, I've caught some really, really big fish. Fishing for silverfish, I've had carp up well over 10 pounds. So, but that's why I like to use hollow elastic. You can see if you look at the end here, with hollow elastics, the only thing is you have to use an external bush here. This is a Drennan external bush, big diameter, and fitted over the pole itself, just to give you the right diameter. That's the only thing. Hollow elastics, you need to use external bushes, otherwise you have to cut the pole tip back too far if you want to put an internal bush in it. But I find these are very good, nice and smooth in their action. So that's the rig for fishing on the drop with maggot or caster. Gone back down into the deeper water again. There's lots of fish on the drop on that lighter rig, but I just thought because it's cold today, the slightly larger fish will be nearer the bottom. I'm feeding today a mixture of, well, this is a lovely roach by the looks of it. That is a big roach. Even these fish really are in superb condition. That is a cracking roach. Typical fish, I mean, you never know what you're going to catch on the bait we're using today. We've just got a real variety, but just look at that beautiful roach. Gorgeous fish, probably 6 ounces, maybe more. There, really is a lovely fish. That was on maggot again. As I'm feeding a mixture of caster and maggot. The caster's mainly to sort of sit on the bottom and hold the bigger fish. But if you're catching small fish, sometimes you can just slip a caster on the hook. I'll pick out one of the darker ones. And if there's plenty of fish about, you can, if you put the point of the hook in that, it looks like there's 2 eyes in the bottom of that caster, but if you just put the point of the hook in that end, and just thread the hook round a little bit and bring it out, sort of so it's, if you can just see it, so it's about halfway down the caster. It's not, you can bury the hook right inside the caster if it's really difficult, but for this sort of fishing, just half hook the caster like that. And you can go out and you can try caster on the hook to see if you catch a bigger fish. If you don't get any bites, then you can come back in, put maggot back on again. So you know there's casters out there. Once the big fish, and they always take a bit longer, once they start to feed on them, then sometimes they feed exclusively on the casters. It's just a matter of weaning them on. Once they start to eat them and think, oh, these are lovely, oh, I love these, then you've got a chance then of getting one of the bigger ones. Trying to drop that exactly over where I put those potfuls of bait, so there's big volumes of bait going in the same area. Roach love casters as well, just like that roach I last caught, they love casters. Just try and probably just to hold it a little bit still. on the bottom, a little bit over depth, and looking for that bite. Oh, that caster works straight away. That's amazing. A good fish. This can often happen. You can change your bait. The big fish are down there. Do you know what? This is one of these days when I've just not known what the fish is that I've hooked. I've just not known. But it just shows you what you can catch using just plain maggot and caster, even in commercial fisheries. You can catch a variety of species, which we have today. Not expensive baits. I've used half a pint of maggots and probably half a pint of casters, so £2 or £3 worth of bait. Should we play guess the fish? I don't know. Probably another small carp, I should think. But it's lovely. It's been one of those days where we've had lots of action. Whatever we've done has worked. Cupping in that big volume of bait. Fish really do fight well here. This is a ghost carp. This is the same or similar to the first fish I caught today. Similar size as well. Small ghost carp, they always seem to fight well. That is a great fish to finish the programme on, and just to show what you can catch. Just pull that out and show it to camera. What you can catch with just normal baits. Beautiful ghost carp, about £1. Really was a fabulous day's fishing. Fishing on the pole using maggot and caster as baits.